Maria sat by the window of her small apartment in Buenos Aires, watching people walk by on the busy street below. The city was full of life, but inside her home it was quiet, too quiet. Maria had been a teacher for more than 30 years. She loved her students and enjoyed helping them learn. But now she was retired. Without her students, the days felt long and empty. She spent her mornings reading the newspaper and drinking coffee, but the silence in her apartment felt heavier with each passing day. One afternoon, Maria turned on the radio. A familiar voice was speaking. It was a local podcast featuring stories from elderly people. A woman was sharing a memory from her childhood, and Maria found herself smiling. The voice on the radio felt warm, like an old friend visiting her home. As she listened, an idea formed in her mind. I have so many stories to tell too, she thought. Maybe I can start my own podcast. At first, the idea seemed impossible. Maria knew nothing about podcasts. She didn't even own a microphone. But the more she thought about it, the more excited she became. If others can do it, why can't I? She said to herself. That evening, Maria took out a notebook and began writing. She wrote about her childhood, her years as a teacher, and the moments that made her laugh and cry. She imagined sharing these stories with others, people who, like her, might feel lonely and need a friendly voice to listen to. For the first time in a long while, Maria felt a spark of excitement. She was ready to start something new. The next morning, Maria looked at her notebook, filled with stories and ideas. She was excited to start her podcast. But there was one problem. She had no idea how to record one. Maria didn't own a microphone, and she barely knew how to use her smartphone. She needed help. Then she thought of Lucas, the young university student who lived next door. He was always carrying a laptop and wearing headphones. Maybe he knows something about podcasts, Maria thought. That afternoon, Maria knocked on Lucas's door. When he opened it, he looked surprised. "Hello, Lucas," Maria said with a smile. "I need your help." Lucas invited her inside and listened as she explained her idea. When she finished, he grinned. "That sounds amazing, Maria. Podcasts are a great way to share stories," Lucas said. "I can help you set everything up." The next day, Lucas brought his laptop and a small microphone to Maria's apartment. He showed her how to record her voice and edit the audio. Maria listened carefully, but the technology was confusing. "So, I just press this red button to start recording?" she asked. "Yes," Lucas said, nodding. "And when you're done, press it again to stop. Then we can edit the audio here." Maria hesitated, then pressed the button. "Hello, my name is Maria," she said nervously. When she played it back, she laughed. "I sound strange." "Everyone thinks that at first," Lucas said, "but you'll get used to it." Over the next few days, Maria practiced speaking into the microphone. Lucas helped her adjust the sound and add music to the background. Slowly, her confidence grew. After a week, Lucas helped Maria set up a small recording studio in her living room. It was simple, a table, a microphone, and a laptop. But to Maria, it felt like the beginning of something special. She was ready to record her first episode. Maria sat at her small table, her hands resting on the microphone. The red recording button on Lucas's laptop was glowing, waiting for her to begin. She took a deep breath and smiled. "Here we go." She pressed the button. "Hello, everyone. My name is Maria," she began. Her voice was calm, but a little shaky. "This is my first podcast. I don't know much about technology, but I do know one thing. I have stories to tell." Maria talked about her childhood in Argentina, growing up in a noisy house with 4 siblings. She described the smell of fresh bread from her mother's kitchen and the sound of tango music playing on the radio. She laughed as she remembered her first day as a teacher, how nervous she had been, and how her students had made her feel welcome. "But now life is different," she said softly. "After I retired, the days became quiet. Sometimes I feel lonely. Maybe you do too." She paused for a moment before continuing. "If you are listening to this, I want you to know You are not alone. Maria finished her first episode and sent it to Lucas. He helped her upload it online, and they waited. At first, nothing happened, but a few days later, something changed. Maria checked her phone and saw a message. "Thank you for your podcast. Your story reminds me of my grandmother. She also feels lonely. I'm going to call her today." Maria's heart warmed. Someone had listened. Someone had cared. Encouraged by the response, Maria recorded more episodes. She talked about love, loss, and the little joys in life. She shared memories of her students and stories about the city she loved. Soon she invited friends from her neighborhood to join her. Carmen, an 80-year-old woman who had once been a dancer, shared stories of performing in grand theaters. Roberto, a retired bus driver, talked about the people he met during his years on the road. As more people shared their stories, Maria's podcast grew. Listeners sent messages of appreciation. Some said her stories made them smile. Others said they made them cry. Maria no longer felt alone. She had created something special, something that connected people, no matter where they were. Maria sat in her living room, holding her phone in her hands. She had never received so many messages before. Every day, new listeners from different parts of Argentina, and even other countries, were sending her kind words. "Your stories remind me of my grandfather. I miss him so much. I listen to your podcast every morning. It makes me feel like I have a friend." "Thank you, Maria. Your voice is warm and comforting. I feel less alone." Maria wiped a small tear from her eye. She never imagined that her little podcast would touch so many hearts. One afternoon, Lucas came over with a big smile. "Maria, look at this," he said, showing her a map on his laptop. "These dots represent where your listeners are from." Maria's eyes widened. There were dots not only in Buenos Aires, but also in Chile, Mexico, Spain, and even the United States. "So many people," she whispered. "How did they find me?" "Good stories travel far," Lucas said. "People share your podcast with their friends and family. And now, your voice is reaching places you never imagined." Maria thought about this for a long time. She had started the podcast because she felt lonely. But now she understood something important. She was not the only one. Loneliness was everywhere. People of all ages in different countries felt the same way. And somehow, through her stories, she was helping them. That evening, Maria recorded a special episode. "Tonight, I want to say thank you," she spoke into the microphone. "When I started this podcast, I thought I was the one helping others. But the truth is, you have helped me too. Your messages, your kindness, and your stories make me feel connected. I may be sitting alone in my apartment, but I don't feel alone anymore." She smiled as she finished the recording. For the first time in years, she felt a deep sense of belonging. Maria had not just started a podcast, she had built a community. One morning, as Maria sipped her coffee and read through the latest messages from her listeners, an idea formed in her mind. What if we all met in person? Her podcast had connected people across different places, but what if they could come together, not just as voices, but as friends? Excited, Maria called Lucas. "I want to organize a gathering," she said, "a place where people can meet, share their stories, and feel less alone." Lucas loved the idea. "That's perfect, Maria. I can help you set it up." They decided on a small cafe near Maria's apartment. It had warm lighting, wooden tables, and a cozy atmosphere, just the right place for storytelling. Maria announced the event on her podcast. "If you've ever listened to my stories, I'd love to meet you. Let's share a cup of coffee and talk. Not through a screen, but face to face." The day of the gathering arrived, and Maria felt nervous. What if no one comes? She wondered. But as she walked into the cafe, she gasped. The room was full. Elderly men and women sat at tables, chatting and laughing. Younger listeners, some in their 20s and 30s, introduced themselves to Maria, saying how much her podcast had meant to them. Carmen, the former dancer, twirled playfully as she greeted Maria. Roberto, the retired bus driver, hugged her warmly. And then, something beautiful happened. People started sharing their own stories. About love, about childhood, about times of sadness and joy. Strangers became friends. Some exchanged phone numbers. Others made plans to meet again. Maria watched it all with tears in her eyes. She had started this journey to ease her own loneliness. But in the end, she had done something much greater. She had built a space where people could connect, understand, and support one another. As the evening ended, a young woman named Sophia approached Maria. "Thank you for this," Sophia said. "I came here because of my grandmother. She listens to your podcast every night. Today, for the first time in a long time, she smiled." Maria's heart swelled with warmth. She realized something important. It was never too late to make a difference. Never too late to find purpose. And never too late to build new connections.